3D Powerpuff Girls Acrylic Nail Art Tutorial by Hotpinkzebrapolish.
Hello guys, in today's video I'm going to be showing you a 3D Powerpuff Girls with all three of them on the nail. They're pretty small. If you wanted to sculpt them bigger and split them up over like 3 different nails, that would be really cool as well. I hope you guys like it as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.
I'm going to begin with an overlay of an aqua acrylic just to give me a nice kind of blue sky type of background over the top of the whole thing. This layer can be very, very thin. It is simply for color. As you can see, my acrylic has those little pigment bursts in it. If you guys are wondering, I know that somebody asked me about it. I do have a replacement set of those acrylics. I just can't bear myself to just throw product away. So I'm just dealing with it in the interim before they are gone, which they're almost gone, so I'll be using the new ones soon. Then I'm going to be encapsulating the nail with a layer of clear acrylic to make sure it is nice and strong, has a beautiful apex, so on and so forth. Then I'm going to be filing the nail into shape with my e-file, starting out with a coarse bit to remove any bulk, and just going over the whole thing and making sure that it has a nice, clean shape. Then going over with a much finer bit just to smooth out the texture of the nail and clean up anything that first file may have left behind. Going over it just like so, and then I'm going to start sculpting Blossom in the middle of the nail near the cuticle. So going over just like so, add her nice oval head. So I recently talked about character breakdown a little bit, and I think the easiest part of, or the biggest key about doing a character breakdown is simply finding the shapes that everything, the base shape under everything. So Blossom's head, well, all of their heads are ovals, and then you're going to add her hair coming down from that with orange, and that's, to me, I would think of that as like a triangle almost, because that's, if you imagine that there was lines around the whole thing, a triangle is probably the closest shape. So when you find that other shape, then you can kind of say, okay, this is a triangle, except, and then you can apply that knowledge that you just discovered to creating the correct appearance. Then I'm going to be sculpting Buttercup in the lower left-hand corner, and typically when you see the Powerpuff Girls, you don't see them all pointing like the same direction. They're kind of fanning out and going different ways, and I decided that on a nail application that appearance probably wouldn't give the best result. So I switched up, I took some creative liberty and I switched it around ever so slightly, and instead of making it they're all going different directions, they're all sort of facing the same way, just so that they fit on the nail and you can get a good glimpse at all of their faces. So now going back to Blossom, I'm going to be adding, with a little bit of pink, I added a little rectangle for her dress, and then I'm going to be adding her bangs on the top of her head, just like so, in separate little bits of acrylic, teeny tiny beads. When you're doing really small beads of acrylic like that, it might actually be beneficial. Sometimes it's hard to get the right amount of monomer on your brush because it's such a small amount. So if you dip your brush in monomer, wipe off as much excess as you can, and then give it one tap on your paper towel. That may give you the right amount in your brush to pick up the tiniest beads that you possibly can. Going back to that creamy light beige color that you're using for their skin, you're going to add her arms and her legs. You could also add her legs with white if you'd like. Actually, you know what? I did use white. I don't know what I'm talking about. Use white for their legs, and then I'm going to be adding her bow with red. So as you can see, I did a little bit on Blossom, and then I went and I did Buttercup, and then I went back to Blossom. So when I do something like that, it's because I'm letting acrylic set, and so it's sometimes it's easier to do a little bit and then step away from it, work on something else, and then go back to it. So now as I'm going to move on to the next part of it, I'm going to be sculpting bubbles in the lower right section. So begin with that same oval shaped head, pressing that out into as close to the same size as the other ones as you can. And then after I've got her head down, I'm going to go back and work a little bit more on Buttercup. Same process, do a little bit of acrylic, let it set, move on, go to something else, and then come back to it. So that way you don't have this color bleed thing happening, because sometimes if, like for instance on Buttercup, if I would have tried to add her black hair right away, it probably wouldn't have gone so well, because the black pigment would have mixed in with the light creamy white or creamy beige pigment, and it would have ended up a muddy mess. So if you let it set for a second, you will have much cleaner, crisper results. So add her hair in 4 different sections, the 2 sections on the top of her head and then the 2 on the sides, just like so. And then the same thing, you're going to need to be adding her arms and her legs. Now this nail is a slight coffin shape, it's a tapered shape, so I don't have quite as much space on the side to completely finish off her figure like I was able to with Blossom. So if you have to cut something off, you know, it's okay, accept it, move on. So you can't see completely all of her legs or all of her arms. So there is her one arm. And the other thing that you could do with a design like this is, one thing that would be fun is you could dedicate each nail to a different character, or you could dedicate 3 nails, 1 to each character, and you could sort of split this design up into multiple nails if you wanted to, and you could sculpt them a little bit bigger because you'd have a little bit more room. So now I'm going to go back to Bubbles, add her dress, add her hair with yellow, go through and add all of her details. Since her head had a second to set up a little bit, you don't have to worry too much about going back and forth and doing that whole process with her, just because you had enough. Basically, it's all that needs to be set is her head, and you can work back and forth within the same character to do the rest of it. So add her head with the yellow, or her hair with yellow, add her bangs, same thing, 4 beads, the 2 on top of her head, and then her 2 pigtails. And then add her legs with white. And there's the first one. There's just a little bit that you can fit on there in this particular one of the other leg, and then add her her arms. A little bit on the other side. Almost none of that is able to be there, but a little bit can. So then after you have that done, I'm going to take some black paint and I'm going to start filling in all of my outlines. When you're doing outlines, I say this a lot, but you want to dilute your paint slightly. So you're going to take, and my favorite method of doing this, I do this 2 ways. The first way is I take and I dip my brush into full strength black acrylic paint, and then I dip the paint and the brush, the whole shebang, into water. So I dip my brush first into the paint and then into the water, and then I mix it on my thumb, which is why my thumb always has a big black splotch of paint on it. The other way that you can go about doing this is that you can take and you have your bottle of black paint. This works really well if it's not a full bottle. I wouldn't just go buy a bottle of black paint and then dilute the whole bottle. But if you have a bottle that's half gone, 2/3 gone, whatever it is, then you can pour not a lot of water in there, maybe a teaspoon. You kind of learn with the brand of paint that you have and your personal painting preferences how much water to pour in. It's kind of you have to figure it out yourself sort of a situation, but just pour in a little splash of water, close the bottle, give it a really, really good shake, and then you have diluted paint that's in the bottle. But as you're working with your paint, it does begin to evaporate, so you may have to do that once a week or so, depending on how often you use it. Re-dilute it just to get it back down to that really nice working consistency. Back to the design, you're going to go through and you're going to first do outlines of their facial features, and then you're going to do a little bit of white on their stockings, on their legs, of white paint just to brighten it up a little bit more, and then go through and add all of the little details to their face, their smile, their eyes, and then within their eyes, they each have their own eye color. On Blossom, I also took a little bit more of red paint to brighten up her bow just because it looked a little too dark, not quite vivid enough for me. I'm going to be adding some pink in her eyes for the iris. Just take a nice little bit of pink as close to the color of her dress as possible. It's so fun to me how they've got these really vibrant eye colors. I don't know, it's so fantastical. I enjoy it. I'm going to add a little bit of a black stripe across her dress. And then taking a little bit more of that black paint that is diluted, I'm going to go back and start adding some outlines on the other characters. Same thing, sometimes you need to do a little bit of painting, let it dry, and then come back to it. So for me, I'm not going to worry about adding the pupils on to Blossom right now. I'm going to let the rest of the paint in her eyes dry and then come back to it. So start adding all the other details to the other characters. There's no particular order you have to do this. The whole design, you could do whatever character you want first. I just like to start in the middle and then work my way out, I suppose. So then I'm going to be adding the eyes on Buttercup. Now on Blossom, as you could see, they were very symmetrical. Her whole face was symmetrical. With the other two, that's not the case because they are facing a little bit to the side. So they aren't as, I don't want to say they're not as easy to paint, but they're not as symmetrical. So you have to kind of balance the design to keep them looking the right direction. Then you're going to want to go back through and add a little bit of black in Blossom's eyes, and then I'm going to work on Bubbles, and I'm going to be brightening up her hair color just like how I brightened up the bow. I'm going to be brightening up the yellow of her hair with a yellow paint, and then going through and adding all of the outlines on her outfit and on her. So with these designs, with these characters, I outlined pretty much everything. Sometimes with the design, you do what I call selective outlining and only outlining what is very necessary. But because of the cartoon style of these characters, you want to make sure that you do fully outline them to really give them that iconic Powerpuff Girl appearance. Same thing going through with her eyes. And just like with Buttercup, Bubbles' eyes and smile aren't symmetrical to her face. Her face is symmetrical, but because of the angle of it, because she's at like a 3/4 view, one eye is appearing larger than the other, or more of it. Fill in her eyes with white. And then I'm going to be adding a little bit more of that white on her stockings, little white highlights in everybody's eyes when you get to that stage, just to make them look really nice and shiny. And I'm going to go back to Buttercup's eyes and add green in them. Again, try to keep it as close to the color as her dress as possible. Since one product is acrylic and one is paint, having an exact match isn't probably going to happen, but you can get it awfully close without too much strain. And the worst one for me was on Bubbles. My blue in her eyes was a lot more of a rich color than the color of her dress. But if you are, if you're worried about that, you could definitely paint over the dress color with the acrylic paint and nobody'd ever know. Then take some black paint and add their pupils in both of their eyes. And then same thing, after you have that done, you're going to want to add little white highlights in their eyes to make their eyes look nice and sparkly. Adding the little white highlights is one of my favorite things to add on characters because it adds so much dimension to them in like 2 seconds flat. Then I'm going to be applying a layer of gel sealer over the background in between all of their arms and legs and everything, filling it in just like so. Cure that, and then after that's cured, I'm going to be applying a little bit of matte top coat over the characters to protect the acrylic paint. And that is it. I hope you guys like this design, especially if you are Powerpuff Girl fans. I loved how I was able to fit all the characters into one tiny little nail, and here is a Melody Minutes.
What is
Melody,
it?
what is that?
Is that berry?
You say berry?
Can you say raspberry?
Job. She said berry. Good job.
Yum. Raspberry.
Oh.
Melody, can you feed your baby? You got some good food there. Melody, feed your baby. Feed your baby.
Thanks for watching. That was actually some pretty old footage of Melody, and it's funny, I can tell how much shorter her hair is. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!